Check one, check two. All right, everybody, let's get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, and welcome to the SCCU Daily Planet Theater for the Lunchtime Discovery Series. It's great to be with everybody. Hi, folks. Welcome in. Grab a seat. Join us from anywhere in the museum. If you're in the building, we're going to do some cool sciencey kind of stuff here inside the globe. You can come and join us. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in online as well. Jump in the chat, say hi, hello, drop a little waving hands emoji just to let us know that you're joined in for today's program. We're going to have an interesting one. Of course, we do this every Wednesday at noon. We're gathering here in the SCCU Daily Planet Theater and on the museum's YouTube channel to meet interesting people doing interesting work out there in the realms of science, nature, conservation, education, and more all the time. The folks in the Office of Environmental Education with the Department of Environmental Quality do fantastic work. They know great people to bring into the museum and to join us online to share their expert insight, their research, whatever it is that they're working on. We meet cool people who are doing great stuff out there, and it's a fantastic program every single week. Never been a bad one. Never been a bad one. He said, waiting on, I don't know, some technical thing to go wrong now that I said it out loud. That's just a joke for the EE people to laugh at, sitting in the back row. Well, my name is Chris. I'll be your host for the program. My job is just to introduce our fantastic guest speakers. So let's get to it. Today we're going to be learning a little bit about pesticides. And so we went and got somebody who thinks about these things a lot to share with us. Amanda Bratcher is an extension agent with the Lee County Center of the North Carolina Cooperative Extension and is going to share with us today. So let's go ahead and get started. Everybody welcome Amanda to the stage.
Thank you, Chris. It's going to take me a second to get used to using a microphone. I'm usually just giving it to a room, and now I've got this whole theater of people. Oh my goodness. Hello, everybody. This is so cool. I've never given a presentation in such a cool place, so you're going to have to give me a fangirl moment. So my name is Amanda Bratcher. I'm the horticulture agent for North Carolina Cooperative Extension in Lee County, and we're going to talk about pesticides today. And this is a just the facts talk to help you be an informed and consumer and protect pollinators and the environment. And one of the reasons why I'm kind of passionate about educating people about pesticides, not necessarily about applying pesticides, although I am a licensed pesticide applicator, I also promote and work with this great organization and program, the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. You can go ahead and mark your calendars next August 2020, or the 22nd and the 23rd of next August. You can count pollinators along with 4 other, potentially 5 other states in the southeastern United States. And one of the things that does impact pollinators is pesticide applications. There's a lot of concern out there for concerned homeowners and consumers and folks who just love animals and nature about how pesticides impact our pollinator friends. And so this is just to help give you some tools for thinking about pesticides. And maybe, hopefully, get rid of some of the misinformation that's out there. I do want to let you know I am going to throw up some chemical labels and mention some companies by name. I am not doing that because I endorse anybody. I am purely using that for an educational purpose. So please don't take any of these references for use this chemical for this. North Carolina Cooperative Extension is an organization that we have agents in every county in North Carolina, including the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, and we serve folks across North Carolina with research-based information to help them reach any kind of production, plant, family, cooking-related goals. And you can find your North Carolina Cooperative Extension Center here at this website. And I highly recommend reaching out to them. And in fact, our folks in Western North Carolina, our hearts go out to them. And a lot of the county centers in the western part of the state are coordinating education efforts and resource efforts. So I'm coming from Lee County. Now I'm presenting obviously in Wake County, but some folks may not know who are online where the heck Lee County is. And we are technically almost in the heart of the state. We're not quite the geographic center of North Carolina. It's just over the line in Chatham County. but we're just southwest of Wake County, of Raleigh. And we have a very rural population still, but we still have a lot of folks who are very passionate farmers and passionate folks who are starting to get into farming and gardening. And so I like to help folks build a frame of reference of thinking around pesticides. So when you're considering using pesticides, you need to ask yourself some questions. You know, what are your landscape management goals? What do you want your landscape or your garden to do? And what do you want it to not do? A lot of times people choose not to use pesticides because they don't want to poison the environment. That's not necessarily what pesticides always do. But think about what you're really trying to get out of your garden. Some people just want something green that enhances the value of their property. Some people really want to see animals, they want to see pollinators. They want to have something of beauty and some place to learn. But thinking about why you are managing a landscape and then how you're managing it is the next step. So I bring up this. So North Carolina has undergone an incredible shift in population in the last 20 years. So this is the population increase between 2000 and 2010, and the darker the blue means the greater the population increase. So obviously around our urban centers, but really across the state, except for a few places in eastern North Carolina. That has changed recently in the last 10 years, from 2010 to 2020, this concentration around our urban areas especially has gotten even starker, and we have this very clear rural divide. So this talk today is really more talking about our homeowners and folks who have home landscapes, because the traditional landscape is really, unfortunately, very reliant on chemical pesticides. It's often dominated by non-native, non-ecologically functioning plants, aka lawns. Lawns are not natural in the southeastern United States, sorry to tell you. They don't sustain natural communities that they replaced. You go from having a 1 or 2 or 5 species per 1,000 square feet from maybe 20 or 30 or 40 species per 1,000 square feet. So it's a real big hit to our natural ecosystems. And so they don't support that natural ecosystem. Now, if you read online, there are our lawn culture supports a lot of flies and ants and spiders. And sometimes when I tell people that, they go, "Ooh, what?" And it's like, well, you know, it's outside. That's where the animals live. And spiders and ants and flies are very important animals as part of the ecosystem, but they kind of get oogie about it. So having these kind of unnatural systems where we live around ourselves, it creates an ecological imbalance. And so a lot of times we have unrealistic expectations of what our plants are supposed to do. We have an unrealistic expectation of what our landscapes are supposed to look like under the given conditions. When we scrape away the topsoil, we actually end up hurting our plants even more, because there's a lot of really beneficial organisms in topsoil, and when we scrape it away to build our houses, we put plants in places where really plants would not naturally grow. So when we have unhealthy plants, we have an increased susceptibility to pests and stress. So I got a slew of phone calls over the summer. Every single time we went through a weather shift, when it was dry, I got phone calls. When it went from cold and wet, I got phone calls. But the phone calls definitely coincided with these huge shifts in weather events, and they all kind of harken back to this plant is just stressed, and this stressor is the thing that helped it kick the bucket. And then finally, we tend to, if we have an imbalance in our ecosystems, we tend to kill off the natural predators of our pest insects, and so then we get an increase in our pests and nothing to eat them. So I'm gonna hark on this a little bit, but your plant's health is critical to your landscape's performance. I cannot stress this enough. If you can create a healthy ecosystem for your plant to live in, and you make sure you prioritize healthy plants, a lot of the reasons that we apply pesticides kind of go away. It's just different work is what I tell people. A lot of people want a quick answer. They want no maintenance landscaping, and that is not a thing. So let's just put that one out there. But your job as a manager is to balance the needs of your plants with what you need to do or what you want to do with what's going to happen in the ecosystem. And just for your frame of reference, there's kind of 4 main stressors for plants, or things that put pressure on plants. The first one is the climate. Plants can't move, but we move them. Sometimes we put plants from other places in our landscapes, and that's okay. Sometimes we put plants from other landscapes in our landscapes that really shouldn't be here because they don't like our climate. Genetic pressures, so we talk a lot about this. If you're a big pollinator gardener, we always talk about, double flowers don't provide the same level of services to pollinators. But genetics has a huge impact on how plants perform a variety of services. Ecological pressures. I talk a lot to folks in Lee County because we're just starting to see that increase in people moving into the area. But I know that here in Wake County in our urban centers, as more and more of these subdivisions are built and more natural areas are cut down, we're starting to see increased deer pressure and other wildlife pressure because our landscapes, we want them to regreen, and that's where they go. And then finally, our management pressure. So that expectation that we're going to have this big, beautiful lawn and a bunch of evergreen trees that flower year-round, and we don't have to do anything to them. They just kind of do their own thing is very, unrealistic, but also in the pursuit of trying to make plants do something they don't naturally want to do, we tend to have this need these chemicals to kind of stimulate them. So finally, let's ask ourselves a few more questions. What are you going to do to achieve your goals? What are your expectations? And what do you need to know to achieve those goals and meet those expectations? And that's kind of where extension comes in. The Extension Master Gardener program is there to educate folks and extend the research-based information into communities, but also we have a slew of free resources for folks to help them reach their gardening goals. So why do we reach for pesticides? Because something bad is happening to my plant, and we feel the necessity to spray something on it. I don't know where that came from, but that's really kind of where a lot of our culture has moved to. So when plants are growing where they're not wanted, when some insect starts eating your plant and you're not sure why, when a mushroom shows up in your yard, oh my gosh. But really the question you need to be asking yourself is, are these organisms negatively impacting your desirable plants? If the answer is no, it's good. It's no. Your plant's going to be fine. Stuff is happening in the ecosystem all the time. So unless your plants are being negatively impacted, you're going to be okay, and your plant will be too. Our plants want to survive despite us, trust me. So what is a pest? A pest refers to a fungus, an insect, a disease, a weed, any organism that its biology, behavior, and location places it in direct conflict with humans. Notice that is not an ecological definition. Ooh, okay. Gotta check the mic. It is a human-based issue. So when you, as a human, perceive an animal, organ, fungus, insect, whatever, as a pest, it becomes a pest. So if we can just expand our minds, we'll be okay. And only about 1% of insects are considered crop pests, and crop is also including our landscape plants. Just think about that. Only 1%. So most of the time, 99% of the time, it's probably going to be okay. So when insects, or arachnids, if you have spider mites, that is not an insect, they have 8 legs, they usually become a pest when we have large monocultures, the same thing planted over and over and over and over, because you have all the right food in one place. It's really great. When the natural predators have been wiped out. So when you have a lot of the same thing, you're only going to support a lot of the same thing. So diversity is really important. When you improperly use insecticides or fungicides, because not only insecticides are what impact insects. And then usually either the under-fertilization or over-fertilization of landscapes. Now, wait a second, Amanda. Like, I know that my plants aren't going to be doing good if I don't put fertilizer on them, but if I put too much fertilizer on them, it's going to be bad? Yes. Some plants will go, hey, thanks for the extra serving. Put on a bunch of fresh growth. It doesn't have the protective chemicals that it otherwise might have. And the insects go, hey, thanks for the buffet. Appreciate this. So when do bacteria and fungi become pathogenic? I love the disease pyramid because it's super simple. You have to have 4 things for a disease to be a disease. You have to have the right environment. It has to be the right time of year. You have to have the host present, and you have to have the pathogen present. So that's really great because a lot of those things, we can control the environment and we can control the host. Sometimes we can't control the pathogen. So 2 of those things are very much in our control, and we can see the timing coming. And timing really refers to the time of year and the type of climate that's kind of happening. So I just remember I was talking with a colleague when we went from that really hot and dry to that really, really saturated and the temperature dropped really quickly. I said, I bet you next week I'm going to get a bunch of phone calls about a bunch of dead plants. And that's because there's a whole slew of bacteria and fungi that cause root rot diseases that are in the soil all the time, just doing their thing. But when the soil becomes really saturated and you have a stressed plant, those naturally occurring bacteria and fungi can become pathogens. So that's why having a healthy plant is really important. And then finally, when do plants become weeds? When a plant is growing where you don't want it. Some people consider some of their pollinator plants that they planted a couple of years ago weedy, not invasive, because they set seed or they run around, and then they suddenly become weeds. So expand your mind on weeds. Not all plants are bad, but there is a agreed upon definition of invasive species. So it's a non-native species that displaces native species, it disrupts natural ecosystems, and it causes economic harm. And if anybody has looked at the numbers for getting rid of invasive species in our national parks, we pay a bunch of money to pay people to go and apply pesticides. So, and a lot of the species that are considered weeds are really just early successional plants that are trying to move into an ecological niche that we've kind of opened up when we've cleared a bunch of land or stressed a bunch of plants out. These are plants that are going, hey, hold on, I'm coming in, I'm gonna get the soil ready in a couple years for some other plants to move in, and we just don't want them there. So what is a pesticide? In essence, it's any substance or mixture of substances intended for preventing, destroying, repelling, or mitigating any pest. So it can be anything, really. It doesn't have to be liquid or granule. It can be anything that is used for that purpose. So the intent is really where the definition is, not necessarily what it's made out of. The other big question, what aren't pesticides? They are not a silver bullet. They are not going to be the answer to your question. They are not going to be the answer to your problem. They may be part of the solution, but they are not the answer. So chemical control, like I was saying, unfortunately, is still a very big basis of our plant health program. And we're really trying to move away from this. And I think that's where a lot of people go very anti-pesticide. And they still should be considered a tool in the toolbox. The other thing is concern about resistance and cost. There's a lot of research that goes especially into turf pesticides because we put so much chemical out in a lot of our turf systems that we tend to select for things that can actually become resistant to those things. But that can happen in other oversprayed systems. And then also just the concern for the ecological effects. We are still learning about how pesticides, not just insecticides, but fungicides and herbicides make it back to pollinator nests and how they impact the survivability of insects. So they are easy to use, they're easy to get a hold of, but there is a lot of we already know that they're negatively impacting pollinators and other animals, and also aquatic animals, but they can be cheap. So we're trying to really kind of reframe how we're doing this. Pesticides are one tool in the IPPM, the Integrated Pest and Pollinator Management Toolbox. And if you Google IPPM or IPM, that is where you can learn a slew of things about all the different techniques that you can use in your landscape. So all the different strategies. And I love this triangle because the basis of this triangle that you can see is landscape management. A successful plant health program is founded on healthy landscape management. And it's only as you get to the top of the pyramid when you've done all of the groundwork, so to speak, that you move into using pesticides. The other thing is a lot of times people apply pesticides on the wrong thing. So actually properly identifying the issue that you have going on before you apply a chemical pesticide is so important. I'm not going to read all 10 of these diagnostic steps to you. I want you guys to know that there is a way to think through these things. And I hope that you guys at home take this. Extension Master Gardener volunteers are trained on this. Extension agents are trained on this. But this is also what our specialists are trained on. So if you called me up and said, Amanda, my azalea is dying, like a client did yesterday, my question is not, okay, what do we spray on it? My question is, okay, what do you mean by dying? Okay, she's like, okay, it's turning brown. Okay, where is it turning brown? How long has it been brown? Can you bring in a sample? So I'm not immediately going, okay, what can she put on her azalea to make it survive? There's a whole slew of questions to ask. The last question I like for people to answer to themselves is, how serious really is the pest problem? Is it just one little thing over here? Is it one part of one plant that's not really important in your landscape? I always love that people are paying attention to their landscapes, so I do encourage folks like, hey, I'm glad you're paying attention. Rest assured, that's not a big issue, but a lot of times if it's not a huge problem in your landscape, the best thing to do is nothing at all. And going back to that point of putting a pesticide on the wrong thing, I have people, all the Facebook groups, gardening Facebook groups for North Carolina are fascinating because people put up all sorts of worms all the time. And that is a very charged word. What is a worm? Some people refer to worms, caterpillars are worms, grubs are worms, maggots are worms. No, they're not. They may look like them, but they're not. And honestly, if you don't know the difference between at least just these three things up here, you could be putting the wrong chemical on your yard if you need to treat one of them. Hibiscus sawfly is the one that comes to mind the most. Hibiscus sawfly, the larvae are technically maggots, but they look like caterpillars. But if you applied BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a known pesticide for controlling caterpillars, if you try to put that on hibiscus sawfly, it does nothing because they are not caterpillars. They are a type of wasp and are not impacted by that chemical. So understanding the life cycles of our pollinators and insects and other insects informs our management. And hopefully not informs it just on what to apply, but also maybe where to apply and when not to apply and things like that. And so hopefully you're going to call up your local cooperative extension office and be like, hey, Amanda, there's something wrong with my plant, or local cooperative extension agent, master gardener volunteer. And if we can't figure it out, we can send them to the Plant Disease and Insect Clinic at NC State. And if you go through your cooperative extension office, it's a $15 discount if they need to send in a sample. Now, they also do photos for free. So if you can send in a really good photo, you don't even have to pay anything at all. So let's say you do have a pest and you're like, okay, I really feel like I need to treat for this. It's becoming an issue. It's negatively impacting my plants. What are you going to do? you are going to make sure that you're timing your pesticide to know that it's actually going to impact the thing that you want to treat for and not your pollinators or any other non-target organisms. You want to know how your pesticide works. You want to use different types of chemicals. So if you have a problem that's reoccurring, you probably have some other landscape maintenance thing that you should be doing. You're probably doing the wrong thing. But if you're applying a chemical over and over and over, you need to use different types of chemicals because plants and insects can become resistant to them. You always want to do it according to the label. And if you are not sure, or even if you think you're sure, please still call your local cooperative extension office. We are happy to help you with this. In North Carolina, we have this really awesome resource called the Ag Chem Manual. It's updated every year. Specialists at NC State, NCDA, and across the Southeast look at this Ag Chem Manual every single year and update it with the most up-to-date science. Not only just saying, hey, use this chemical to treat for this pest or disease, but they also add like really fun notes about them, about what the research is saying about maybe a certain chemical. And it's a really wonderful resource. It's free on the internet. And a lot of actually local cooperative extension offices have a few printed copies kicking around their offices. And we are happy to help you navigate it because it is a wee bit of a tome. But don't fall for the marketing. This is high yield kills all. Isn't that great? I want to kill something. I'm going to go get the kills all. Okay, cool. There's a lot going on with the marketing there, but pesticides that we can buy here in North Carolina are made of kind of here in the United States, contain kind of two main ingredients. The active ingredient, which is the thing that is actually doing the treatment on what you're treating for. And then there's the inert ingredients or the other ingredients that are kind of either keeping it shelf stable or when they interact with the way you mix it, make the chemical actually work and do the thing that it is labeled for. So knowing where to find that, obviously you're walking into your local big box store maybe, or your local hardware store, and your aisle looks a lot like this, and it's like, ooh, I know that brand, or I know that label, or I want something cute and cuddly that like this can't be that bad. It says dandelion doom, and it's in a really cute, or aquamarine container. You still need to look at what the active ingredient is and how that active ingredient is going to work. You can throw those chemicals names into your search engine and find out how they work and whether they're actually going to do what you want it to do. Because remember, they're trying to just sell you something. It's going to do what you want it to do, and you can also learn how it can impact other organisms. Just because you can buy them does not mean chemicals and pesticides are harmless. I saw a client the other day. I was driving down the road, and a lady was using a store-bought, pre-mixed chemical sprayer, killing the weeds in her lawn, and spraying the weeds between her legs and walking through the sprayer. She was wearing Crocs and short shorts and a tank top, and I actually threw on the brakes and backed up and courteously reminded her, like, hey, that is not a very safe thing you're doing right now. Please, finish up what you're doing, but when you go inside, take a shower, wash your clothes separately from all your other clothes, and next time you apply pesticides, make sure you're wearing long sleeves, long pants, closed-toed shoes. And she's like, oh, I just didn't know. And you know how you would have known that? If you had read the label first, because all of the things that you need to know about a pesticide are written on the label. And I just wanted to mention, it's not going to talk about the mode of action. It is just going to tell you the really basic information, but I highly recommend throwing the active ingredient into a search engine to learn how that particular chemical works. Because that can tell you whether or not you may want to choose one versus the other if you're not trying to impact other organisms. So mode of action is how a chemical pesticide kills a weed, disease, or insect. So don't fall for the marketing. Please, please, please. Always look, and usually it's at the bottom of the front, and then it says, hey, turn over to read more on the label, and there's usually like a little booklet that's taped to the back of it. That is really, really critical information. It is printed in very tiny print, so if you can't read that, you can also pull up that label on the internet and read it in big script. All natural and organic does not inherently mean safe or not harmful. Just because a pesticide was derived from an animal or a plant does not mean it can't harm you. I cannot stress that enough. All natural does not have a legal definition. That leaf looks all natural, right? It's a stock photo of whatever. So it's all just it's a cushy marketing word. It means what you think it means. So be skeptical of that. The other thing is, organic also does not mean that it is safe. Only if something is organic certified does it mean that it meets certain standards. But even if it's organic certified, that does not mean that no chemicals have been used. There are chemicals that are approved for use in organic systems. And there's this other thing called the exception rule. So if an organic farmer is trying to control for a pest or disease, and they've tried all their organic options, and those organic options are no longer working, they can appeal to use a non-certified organic product in their production system to treat for that pest or disease. So knowing your farmer is really important, but also just not assuming that those words really have any kind of legal definition. Case in point, insecticidal soaps. Well, insecticidal soap kind of sounds kind of soft, right? It's like, okay, I'm trying to kill insects with a soap. We use soap on our hands and in our hair, so it's safe, right? And to an extent, obviously, we're trying to encourage you to read the label. So we got our insect-killing soap, okay, with seaweed extract. Oh, that's really great. Love that. That must mean it's good because it's got seaweed in it, and seaweed's natural, right? And we've got these really great words. We've got safe on plants. Great. Don't want to kill my plants when I spray them with insecticidal soap. And we've got this other one that says organic gardening. Ooh, so if I'm trying to garden organically, I can use this, right? That label is just a marketing gimmick. It's just the same as that cute little leaf I used on my last slide. It's just there to hook you in to get you to buy that product. It does, however, have Omni-approved chemical, so that is an actual certification. So that chemical does meet certain guidelines to have that label on it. So okay, so we do have some guidelines and some references there, but it still says to keep out of reach of children. So please don't give it to your kids to drink, and don't stick it where they can grab it. So it's not safe to drink. Okay, well, whatever. And then we have our active ingredients, because they're supposed to have them on there. And the way that this works is it controls certain soft-bodied insects, so it has to be a soft-bodied insect, through dehydration. And you have to apply it on the top and the bottom of the leaves because this chemical has to get in contact with the insect you are treating. So if you don't have the pest present, you should not apply this. It's not going to do what you think it's going to do. It has to come in contact directly with the organism that you're trying to kill. Also, any pesticide, whether it's an insecticide, a fungicide, or an herbicide, can kill plants at the wrong temperature. So here it says it may damage plants if applied in full sun or at temperatures above 90 degrees. All the label will tell you all that. And it's only effective as long as it's wet. So once it dries, you have to reapply it to kill those insects. So reading that label is going to tell you all of that. And if you're out there and you're like, well, I don't need to buy insecticidal soap. I use Dawn and no offense to Dawn, I use Dawn and salt and water, and it cures me of all of my ails. Detergents and dish soaps are not labeled for pesticides, and they can cause issues with plants. I have gotten people saying, well, why is my plant dead? I'm like, well, what did you put on it? Because you can clearly tell when something is kind of wilting because of having the wrong chemical applied to it. And a lot of times it's people, they're like, I just applied some Dawn dish soap. And it's like, well, not really how it's supposed to be used. I keep throwing out this word non-target organism, and really this is just anything else that can be impacted or killed by a chemical pesticide application. And I'm throwing up a honeybee there because honeybees and bees tend to get the most press, but there's a lot of other insects and animals, including us, that can be non-target organisms if you are not applying them in the right way. And this is a great graphic. I love to share this with folks. This is a graphic from the Xerxes Society for Invertebrate Conservation. And we're always kind of obsessed with like the direct contact of a chemical pesticide with pollinators. Like, oh my gosh, there is a bee on this flower. I'm spraying a pesticide. And oh my God, I have sprayed that bee with pesticides. And you feel very guilty about that. But there's kind of 3 other ways that insects and other animals can kind of come in contact with pesticides. So you can spray that flower with a pesticide, and a bee comes in later and interacts with the tissues that have that chemical residue on it. They maybe grab a stem or a piece of a leaf to take back to their nesting site, or even you spray the nesting site directly. More than 70% of our native bees in North Carolina, more than 70% nest in the ground. So, we're really obsessed with flowers, but when we're spraying open ground with pesticides, we could be spraying our native bees. Get a lot of calls in February and March and April when people think that they're seeing these clouds of bees flying above their lawns, and they think they're yellow jackets, and a lot of times there are native orchard bees. So make sure you're getting the pest identified before you feel like you need to treat. Mosquito sprays. Okay, this is another big question I get. And should you spray or should you just leave them? And there's a whole host of reasons why we treat for mosquitoes, and people choose to spray their yards for mosquitoes. But I really challenge folks to think a little deeper on why they're doing that. Because again, a lot of these, there's a lot of non-target organisms that can be impacted. So really, really think very strongly, and I'm not gonna like totally read all these questions to you. I can post this on my website later, but it is well worth doing some soul searching because there's a lot of non-target organisms. So this is the page from the Ag Chem manual for mosquito recommendations, chemical recommendations. And here's a nice pretty list so you don't have to read those tiny print on the screen. If you throw that, is this chemical safe for bees? These are the ones that will kill bees. And many of these are also toxic to aquatic organisms and have restrictions on how close you can be to a waterway when you apply them. And a lot of them also come with the stipulation, these chemicals should not be used to spray large areas for mosquitoes. Now you notice there's clove oil, cottonseed oil, rosemary oil, geraniol, and wintergreen. Those are the kind of those natural pesticides, and they're really actually just deterrents. People like citronella candles for the same kind of reasons. So be very discerning when you're doing that. And you can always look at the National Pesticide Information Center. It's based out of Oregon State, so you can get some really great information from there. So, reminder, the label is the law. It has everything you need to know about safely applying that pesticide, including what PPE, how you should store it, when you should apply it, where you should apply it. More is not better. Please, please, please read the label and apply it at the recommended rate. Just because 1 tablespoon is good doesn't mean 2 tablespoons is better. Cannot emphasize that enough. Just because you spray this week doesn't mean you should spray next week. It will tell you how frequently you can spray a pesticide. And then also, just because you need to kill a weed over here and treat for this insect over here and maybe do this other thing over here does not mean if you put those 3 chemicals together in the same tank and apply it and just kill all these birds with all these stones. It does not work that way. In fact, it can be very harmful to you. So do not combine chemicals unless the label says you can. There are also things called restricted use pesticides. And as homeowners and consumers, you cannot buy these. You have to have a pesticide applicator's license to buy these. But I know some people who are going to get me that cool chemical that does that cool thing for my yard, and I'm just going to use that because I know it works. Please don't do that. Beware of those friends who are chemical happy and be like, hey, I got some of this stuff hanging around. Just put this on your lawn and it's going to be great. You can run into a lot of issues with the law, especially if they have a pesticide applicator's license, but also you can cause irrevocable harm to yourself and to the ecosystem, because a lot of times these chemicals are rated restricted use because you have to have special training to apply them. So the label is not hard to do, and if you go on the Extension Office's website, you can learn how to read a pesticide label. It's patience, really. It's very dense and it contains a lot of legal jargon, but there's a lot of really important information, including how it protects pollinators in a lot of cases. When you're applying pesticides, make sure you're wearing the proper protective equipment. This guy is wearing all the good stuff. He's got a mask on, he's got glasses on, he's got long sleeves, chemical resistant gloves, not your cloth gardening gloves, because you can still have material seep through those gloves, closed-toed shoes, long pants. You're just trying to cover up as much of yourself as you can in most cases. And then you're gonna wash those clothes separately from your other clothes because you're gonna have chemical residues on them. I also want to let you guys know, so you do have to have a pesticide applicator's license in North Carolina to apply pesticides in certain cases. But from 2017 to 2021, of the more than 1,300 reported pesticide-related illnesses and injuries, 129 of those were related to an occupation, whether that was a farm worker or a landscaper. But more than 1,200 of them were homeowners. So, what does that tell us? That tells us that a lot of people are not reading the label and applying things a safe way. They think, oh, because I can buy it, it's safe. It is safe when you read the label. So please, please, please read that label. And if you do feel like you have been poisoned or have become sick from pesticides, make sure that you seek a medical attention immediately, and you bring the pesticide label with you and the MSDS sheet, or the material safety data sheet. If you don't know what that is, just bring the label and or the name of the pesticide with you. But the label is the best one because your doctor is going to need to know what that specific formulation is in order to make sure that they're treating you appropriately, because some things they have to treat differently. Sometimes you can throw things up and sometimes you can't throw things up. And then there's actually a medical obligation. A doctor, when they are treating someone with a pesticide-related injury, they have to report it to the Department of Health and Human Services. Now, this is where NCDA might get mad at me, but there is a way to have if you believe that someone has applied a chemical improperly on your property, there is actually a regulatory section of the NCDA, the Department of Agriculture here in North Carolina, and their number is listed there. But if you feel like there has been a chemical improperly applied on your property, please call the Extension Office. A lot of times we can help walk you through those questions that I listed earlier. And we can help you make sure that you do need to call the NCDA or not. And a lot of us know our local pesticide inspectors and can help work with them to make sure that you get what you need. Finally, let's say you do have pesticides, or you have some old stuff that's been just sitting in the shed. Maybe you've noticed that it's like starting to congeal or it's starting to separate. Please don't apply chemicals if you're noticing separation and it's not supposed to be doing that. So old chemicals, you can get rid of them at household waste disposal days. And these are county-based. There's a whole section within NCDA that works with the local county governments and the extension offices. And it just is a free and open day where anybody in the county can bring all their janky bottles and weird chemical things down to a certain site, and we actually can take it away safely, and it doesn't end up in a landfill or in a huge burning chemical fire in someone's field, which you should not do. You should never throw pesticides away in a landfill. And if you have finished using a chemical, you need to triple rinse the container that it came in and puncture that container so no one else can put anything else in it. And do not reuse it. I know it's really tempting to reuse those pre-mixed chemical things with the sprayers on them. Please don't reuse those. It is so unsafe. You never know how chemicals are going to react with each other. And finally, I'm going to leave you with this. If you are working with a landscaper or a landscaping company and they say, I want to apply a chemical pesticide on your property, or I want to do, we need a treat for this, or we have a fungus issue, or you want to spray for mosquitoes, make sure that they have a pesticide applicator's license. In the state of North Carolina, you have to have a pesticide applicator's license to apply pesticides on someone else's property for money. Do not assume that the person who is offering to spray your yard has one. There are a lot of landscapers out there that don't realize that there is a licensing structure for chemical application in North Carolina. They just think, hey, I'm going to start a landscaping business, I'm going to mow and blow, and hey, I'm just going to go down and get some glyphosate and spray that as well. You have to have a license to do that because you can apply chemicals improperly. So ask. And you are within your rights as a property owner and manager to do that. If you are a landscaper and you're listening to this and you want to be in compliance with applying chemical pesticides on other people's property, you can get a pesticide license. It is very easy. Contact your local cooperative extension office, and we can help you get access to the materials that you need to test that test. It's all self-study, but there's pesticide schools. I'm teaching one in Chatham County in November. It's a very nominal fee, and we are there to help you study for the test. And then a lot of extension offices offer free classes to help you maintain your continuing education credits. So we are here to help you make sure you keep the environment safe, each other safe, our pollinators safe, because pesticides are only one tool in the IPPM toolbox, and they are not the only tool in the IPPM toolbox. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Great talk. Excellent information. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing. We'll take some questions now. You ready?
Sounds good.
Cool stuff. So if you are in the room and you've got questions, just wave at me, let me know. If you're watching online, you can type your questions into the chat box on YouTube or use the hashtag Lunchtime Discovery on social media. That way we see your comments and questions and we'll get them here into the program. So, Amanda, we'll turn to the chat because that's where a bunch of questions came in for you.
Let's do it.
So, I'll start with, what is the best approach to get rid of ants and ant piles in my yard that would not affect pollinators, considering that so many nest in the ground?
That is an excellent question.
Read the label.
Read the label.
Okay.
God almighty, yes.
I feel like that's the answer to every question today, is read the label.
It really is the answer to like 90% of the questions that are probably in there. But I will amend that with not all ants need to be treated. So again, kind of going back to identifying the pest in question. Now, imported red fire ants are an invasive species. Use the best product that you possibly can to treat them, and that is one of the few like insecticides that I'm gung-ho, let's do it, use it or lose it, because actually what happens is red imported fire ants, because they're an invasive species, they create an unnatural ecosystem around them. They in fact they negatively impact other organisms. They will eat frogs and anoles and salamanders and other insects in the immediate area. So they kind of create a desert around them that if you don't treat them, it is way worse than accidentally poisoning a non-target organism. They cause way more devastation than a chemical would when applied appropriately. And so there are some people have like their own opinions on like using bifenthrin or a certain type of different products, granule or mound drenches. Really use a plethora of them. Don't stick with just one. Use different types of treatments and be diligent because they will move. So always be scouting for them and treating them and making sure that they don't get too big. And that will they'll have to use less pesticides through time and they won't cause ecological devastation.
Sounds like I have some work to do in my yard. Next up, what information sources would you recommend for non-chemical control of garden issues?
Okay, so
other tools in the IPPM toolbox.
Yes, other tools in the IPPM toolbox. So let me throw this little cool slide up because if anybody's ever heard me talk, they know that I'm very verbose. So I defer back to my earlier point of prioritizing healthy plants and healthy ecosystems. So if you are using a lot of preventative cultural practices, making sure your soil is healthy, making sure you're applying the right amount of fertilizer, reducing weed competition usually through hand pulling. I know, gosh almighty, we have to pull some weeds. It's just therapy. Just put it down as therapy. Applying mulch appropriately, or leaving the leaves, because a lot of our insect predators and other large invertebrates that eat our pest species live in the leaves, in the mulch that we have around our plants. Planting the right plant in the right place, and then pruning plants at the right time. Because if you prune a plant that needs pruning at the wrong time, you can stress it out and then it causes other issues. So they're probably also kind of asking like, okay, if I do have a pest issue and I don't want to apply a pesticide, what do I do? And really it should be a case-by-case basis. So if you feel like you're having an issue with tomato hornworms, or if you're having issues with specific crops that you're trying to grow in your vegetable garden, reach out to your local cooperative extension office, and there are case-specific answers to those questions.
Great stuff. Okay, next up, let's see. Can you elaborate a little more on how and why the overuse of insecticides can be a problem?
Okay, so I wish I had my food web photo in here. So if you kind of think back to, I think I learned this in second grade. So you think about the food web. So plants, there are animals that eat plants. There are animals that eat animals that eat plants, and then there's animals that eat animals that eat plants. And so if you are killing off any amount of those animals or plants in that food chain, in that food web, it creates an imbalance. And Mother Nature is always about balance. So if you kill off all of the wasps, let's say, wasps have a very specific ecological niche in the environment. A lot of them are predators to a lot of our pests. And so when you kill the wasps, there's nothing that are going to be there to eat or kill off your pests, your caterpillars. And so then there's more caterpillars to eat more of your plants, and then the cycle continues. So, like, let's say when you're using an insecticide over and over and over, and you're constantly killing one part of that food web, you are creating this imbalance that Mother Nature feels the need to compensate for. Now, we're over and above the food web and imbalances. Let's say you are trying to kill off, caterpillars. There's a bunch of caterpillars eating, some desirable plants, and you're like, crap, I'm gonna keep killing them, and you keep spraying the same thing over and over, and those caterpillars never show up, and you're like, yes, it's working. But then a caterpillar is there, and you're like, well, okay, I'm gonna up the ante, I'm gonna spray more chemicals, and maybe that caterpillar survives still, and then it has babies with another one that survives. And suddenly now you have a chemical resistant strain of this particular insect that's going to go, hey, cool, I keep spraying that chemical because you're killing off all the other things that I would normally have to compete with, and now I have free keys to the buffet. Thanks a bunch. So diversity and cycling pesticides, is, if you choose to use them, is critical.
Great points. And last one for you. One of our viewers is mentioning that they've noticed the number of moths and say like night flying insects around lights in their neighborhood diminishing over time. Is this due to pesticides, the overuse of pesticides? What should we think about chemicals like that, or what should we think about pesticides and these insect declines that we're hearing about?
That is a great question. There are a lot of things that contribute to the overall decline in insect diversity in our lives. Pesticide use is just one of them. So there's not a lot of really conclusive research that says it's pesticides or it's farming or if it's subdivisions being built. It's kind of this whole group of things, and different researchers kind of look very specifically at each of these elements, but really all of them, if you read their papers, say, well, this is the thing. And really, I think it's a much more complex issue because when you have habitat destruction, there's so much more destroyed than just the species that are no longer there. Our ecosystems and our kind of web of life around us is very incredibly complex and actually tenuous. People are always saying, oh gosh, the earth is dying, blah, 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 blah. No, the earth's gonna be fine. It's all the incredible life that we are alive to witness right now that is just on the precipice. So chemical use, yes, that is one thing that homeowners can control in their local ecosystems, choosing to reduce the use and using it only when necessary, but also reducing habitat destruction. When we're constructing our new buildings, how can we better protect the environment that is being changed when we have to build a building, or where we choose to build our buildings? Are there areas that maybe need to be protected that can provide better ecosystem services, more diverse ecosystem services, and we put our buildings in places that maybe aren't providing as many of those ecosystem services? So there's a whole host of things that go into insect decline, but unfortunately we are seeing maybe not overall decline in like the number of physical insects, but we are seeing a decline in the diversity. So the number of species that are going down and the number of those insects that can fill those niches that are being lost are going up.
Yeah, so it sounds like the more that we can encourage people to better manage landscapes for wildlife, for example, to better manage landscapes for pollinator health and diversity and for wildlife health and diversity, for ecosystem services, whether it's your yard, a park, a community center, a museum, the better that we can do, state parks, national parks, the better that we do at managing those spaces for wildlife and for positive human-wildlife interaction, the better everything plays out across the board.
Definitely, that's the nail on the head. Those positive human insect interactions, and one kind of like section that you didn't mention were counties and municipalities. Folks who are in our, I work with the city of Sanford on the Bee City USA program. Raleigh is a Bee City USA. Durham is a Bee City USA. That's a program through the Xerxes Society for Invertebrate Conservation. NC State is a Bee Campus USA. Part of getting that certification is they have to have an integrated pest management plan that they work through with the Xerxes Society to say, hey, we're going to use these certain practices that are not going to impact or that are going to reduce the impacts of our landscape management on the local ecosystem and environment. And you don't have to go for the Bee City USA certification, but that mentality and holding our municipalities and county governments accountable for that's something that homeowners and taxpayers can do to recognize that a lot of the landscapes that we see around us are being managed by county and municipalities, and there's a lot of good that can be done from managing those public lands.
Well, Amanda, thanks for coming out to the museum today. Thanks for sharing as part of the Lunchtime Discovery Series.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Thanks, everybody.
And everybody, as always, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining us for today's program. Of course, we'll be back here next Wednesday at noon, another fantastic program. We're going to be learning about George Massa, who did a lot of work to save the Great Smoky Mountains. So don't miss it. We're going to have a fantastic presentation. Once again, that's at 12 o'clock next Wednesday. Go ahead and mark your calendars. Head to the website eenorthcarolina.org. That's for the Office of Environmental Education. There you can see updates for the calendar. You can sign up for the email listserv so that you get the link on YouTube in your inbox every week. Or, you get the address to the museum so that you can drive over here and join us inside the globe for more presentations. Or, hey, if you're sitting at your desk across the street, get up and come over here and hang out with us. We're fun, cool people, so I'm told. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. And, I do not want to forget, of course, it was mentioned online in the chat, but our hearts go out to all of our colleagues and our friends who are working around the clock now in Western North Carolina to deal with the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. You can head to nc.gov, nc.gov. Right at the top of the page, there's a banner. So if you're still out there, if you're looking for ways that you can contribute, ways that you can help, DEQ personnel, our friends and colleagues, DNCR sites and colleagues are all working out there, but also just the folks who are living out there. They do need help. So nc.gov is set up right now with ways that anyone everywhere can share resources and get help to the folks in Western North Carolina. So make sure that you check it out. And thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you again next week.